Well, I have a long history. When I was Secretary of Labor in 1969, suddenly I find myself chairman of a cabinet task force on the oil import control system. President Eisenhower thought that if we imported more than 20% of the oil we use, we were asking for trouble in national security terms. And that was obviously getting pushed. So this cabinet task force was formed, and I was the chairman. And we put out a really good report, published. And we said, the problem is really tensions in the Arab-Israeli situation where a lot of the oil comes from. That's what we had to worry about. So I ought to try to import less oil from there, more from Canada. And let's see if we can't save a little bit. And also let's have some storage in the ground and so on. Well, everybody, President patted me on the head, said, nice report. We were at a congressional hearing, nobody did anything. A little while later, I'm director of the Office of Management and Budget, and President Nixon creates the EPA. On a broad base, I think there was broad support for what he was doing. It wasn't like he was trying to get around Congress. But at any rate, when a new agency is formed, they get money from other places and space and so on. And they don't exist, so if you're not careful, they're going to get all the dogs. So the director of OMB becomes their representative. And actually, we're pretty good representatives because the OMB knows where the bodies are buried. And nobody wants to mess around with us too much because we got too much to do. So we created the EPA, and some of the people who were involved had served as staff in that task force that I had been on, and they were very environmentally oriented young people, bright, able. So I sort of got a little interest. So that's some of the early things. And then, of course, a few years later, I'm Secretary of the Treasury, and what happens? The Arab oil boycott. Just as we had said, this is likely. And so I could see the national security aspects of energy. I could see the economic aspects of energy. And I had earlier been exposed to the notions of the environmental aspects of energy. And something else impressed me. There was no energy department, so the Treasury was the energy department. People would come in, and they had ideas about alternatives and saving energy and all kinds of things. And I thought they were interesting, and I tried to do what I could to encourage it. But a few years later, the oil prices go down, the crisis is past, and all that stops. People lose interest. In the 80s, there got to be a growing number of scientists who said that the ozone layer was depleting. And there were doubters, there was debate, but I would say the bulk of them thought it was depleting. But they all agreed that if it happened, it would be a catastrophe. Nobody doubted that. And I was working with them, and our State Department people had a strong role in this. We had a very good EPA person involved. And we had good science, I thought. And I had twice a week private meetings with President Reagan. And so we talked about it. And he thought, and I thought, we better take out an insurance policy. And as it turned out, it worked. But as it turned out, the people who were worried were right. And the Montreal Protocol probably came along just in time. Arnold Schwarzenegger called me, he was the governor, about this Proposition 23 that two dirty Texas oil companies would put on our ballot in California, and asked me to co-chair an effort to defeat it. And I was in favor of defeating it, so I said yes. I said, who's my co-chair going to be? He said, well, we think it'd be good to have a Republican and a Democrat. I said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So a man named Tom Steyer, who I didn't know, I knew of him a little. So I went up and we clicked. But I remember in our first meeting, we said, look, we don't want to just beat this thing. We want to beat the hell out of it. Because the way you really make a point is you have a large victory, a clear mandate from California. We went about it carefully. We got both candidates for governor of California, Republican and Democrat, to be on our side, Meg Whitman and Jerry Brown. We got a lot of business support. We got union support. In other words, we had a coalition of people that was very broad-based. And we said, this is not about politics, this is about solving a problem. And so it was problem-centered. And actually, when the votes were in, we won by the biggest margin of anything on the ballot.
But that's not the way you started out, correct? I believe in the beginning.
We started out, but we put on a hell of a campaign. There's another thing about what Tom and I did. We had a good time. I find the work on solar energy is very important and making huge headway. Actually, I have solar panels on my house on the Stanford campus. I've had them there about 6 years. And I have a little graph that shows my electricity bill before and after. And now the amount of money I've saved pays for the cost of the installation plus the opportunity cost of the money. Well, and I'm driving a little electric car around, so I figure I'm driving on sunshine and it's free. Let's put all forms of energy on a level playing field. Why shouldn't every form of energy bear its full cost and compete fairly then with other forms of energy? And to do that, they should bear the cost of the pollution that they create, the carbon. So I propose a revenue-neutral carbon tax. I make it revenue-neutral so it's not a drag on the economy. It's not a means for raising money. It's for the sole purpose of leveling the playing field. We've had big problems before. We solved them. We've always done it. And we were talking about Ronald Reagan. You know, when he learned that he had Alzheimer's disease, it was about 10 years before he died, he wrote all of us, his beloved American people, he wrote us a long letter, you may remember it, in his own handwriting. And the last two sentences of the letter were, I now begin the journey into the sunset of my life. But for America, I know there will always be a bright dawn ahead. So I'm with him. There is a bright dawn ahead.